to be able to talk to you. I know many of you now, having been on the group for several weeks. About 7 years ago, I was at a friend's property up in Pittwater, Mooring Bay, and as we stood at his property looking over the hills, there was a fire, a bushfire, and it was potentially coming towards his property, 2 kilometers away. Now, my friend had a large hose pipe and pumps. He was ready for this eventuality, hoping that it never came. But if it did, he would try and dampen down the property, or he would try and put the fire out to protect it. During that time, I was there. I helped him to lift the pipes and the pumps, and unfortunately, I did myself an injury. Not serious, but several months later, I finished up in hospital to have the injury corrected under anesthetic. Now, I am pretty old, but I've only been to hospital, I think, twice in my life. So this was, even though it was a minor injury, was a traumatic experience for me. And there I was sitting in the ward, waiting to be wheeled down to anesthetic. Jeannie was there as well. And the door opened and things got worse, because in came a very burly hospital porter. He looked a bit menacing, actually, because he had tattoos all over his body. And he just was the job of taking me down to the anesthetic. Now, I thought that Jeannie being there would be a good idea, but it turned out not to be such a good idea. Because as I was wheeled out, my nerves got even worse. Because this big burly man turned to Jeannie and said, "Do you want him back?" Quick as a flash, he said, "He knows the passwords." Now that reminds me of a story just a few months ago, when I was in England and I was talking to my friend who I've known for many years, very happily married, and we're talking about passwords. And he said to me, he said, "I never tell Anne, my wife, the passwords." I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because she probably will push the wrong button and we'll lose all our money." I said, "But Andrew, what happens if you die?" "Oh," he said, "I've got a plan. I'm ready for that." And she knows where the brown box is, and inside the brown box at the bottom, there's an envelope, and inside the envelope, there's the passwords. So he was ready, even for that sad occasion of his death, but he wasn't going to trust Anne with the passwords. You see, the thing is, I think there's a readiness aspect in all parts of our life. And I want to talk about career readiness this morning and put it in perspective that it makes sense to be ready. Years ago, as you know from our conversations before, Ginny and I are missionaries, and we've been very fortunate. We've been to many countries, and the first country we went to was South America. And I thought, I'm being asked to speak at a business meeting. I'm meeting people I've never met before. I may be asked, "So what is it you are?" And I said, "Well, I'm a coach and I'm a Christian." So we were in a campsite on holiday, and I thought I'd take myself away to this coffee shop in the camp shop and have a coffee. And I took my Bible with me, and I thought I'd take some notes to prepare myself for that eventual question, which I'm sure would come. So what is it you do, and what is a Christian? So Joe, the waiter, came across. I knew his name because he had a badge on, and he looked at my Bible and looked at me. He said, "What are you doing, sir?" I said, "Well, I'm going to South America very shortly, and I'm just preparing for a question that might be asked as, what is a Christian?" And it was interesting because he came back with a coffee, looked round, and there was nobody else in the coffee shop. He sat down and he looked at me and said, "So, sir," he said, "what is a Christian?" Now, as a Christian myself, I thought, what an opportunity. There's this person who was actually asking me about my faith. I thought, well, he's asked, I can tell him. But before I did, I said to him, "Joe, what do you think is a Christian?" And his answer was very similar to many people I talked to. "Oh," he said, "somebody who goes to church." I said, "Well, for how long?" "Somebody who gives money to the church." I said, "How much?" "Somebody who believes in Jesus." I said, "Well, I lived in a Muslim country for 7 years, and the Muslims believe in Jesus. He was a prophet." And there is the question being presented to me, a wonderful question about my faith. And I wasn't just pushing it on him, he was asking me. Now, I would think that that was a very important stage for me, because I realized that I probably only had 2 minutes. And when we think about our conversation with people, very often we only have a few minutes. So we need to be precise. We need to be actually unaware sometimes the need to be so precise and so quick in our preparation for sharing about our faith or even about our profession. No, we were able to go to South America and many other countries, but even that preparation was good because in 2017, Jeannie and I were privileged to be on the Operation Mobilization ship for 1 year. And for those of you who don't know, that's a missionary ship, the largest floating book fair in the world. And for a year, we were on the desk welcoming people, trying to encourage them to actually join the ministry. Several questions we had to ask. Are you 19 or over? Do you come from a church? And are you a Christian? And many, many times we had this very strange answer to that question. Well, I was born a Christian. Well, I live in a Christian country. My parents are Christian. I go to church. I give money. And invariably that conversation led to that same question that Joe asked me. So what is a Christian? And even though I had practiced that over the years, it became something which was part of the work that I did for 12 months, 6, 7 times a day. I just have a brief moment, sometimes just only 2 or 3 minutes, to share what is the most important thing in my life, and that's being a Christian. I think being ready is so important, and being ready to share is equally important. And today I've got the privilege of sharing with you a subject which I'm passionate about as well, and that is career readiness. You see, we get ready for all sorts of occasions. If a baby's going to arrive, we get 8 months' notice or thereabouts. We prepare. Our children are doing examinations and they actually are preparing. They know the day when they have to wake up and go to that examination room, and they put a lot of preparation in order to do well. Judy has run a marathon in the past, and I understand that you don't suddenly get up in the morning and run a marathon. There's a lot of preparation, a lot of things to think about because you want to be ready for that day. And if we had an accident, we know that we would call the police or the fire brigade or the ambulance, and although they don't know that call's coming through, they have no idea that we're going to call, they've got a plan. They know exactly what they're going to do. They're ready. But knowing what to do for career readiness is something that many people really just somehow miss. And I want to talk about that as we go through this session. See, being career ready makes sense. Being career ready means that you can meet any challenge in your career with confidence. Now, many of us think that it's just loss of job. And of course, for the most of us now, in this period, that is the focus. Many people, including many on this group, have lost their job. Well, were you ready for it? Potentially, were you ready to make that transition, having lost your job, made redundant? But there are many other things. I've worked with clients many times over the years where the dream job appears. They suddenly wake up, open the journal, and there's a job which they really wanted, but they're not ready. They have no CV. They haven't been to an interview for years. They don't know what to do. They're just really struck by the possibility, but are not prepared to go for it. My son-in-law is a headhunter, and continually throughout the day, he's contacting people all the time who are in work, but they want to buy their experience. So he's paid to find these people. And invariably, not always, but invariably, these people are just not prepared because they're caught by surprise. They're delighted that somebody has actually approached them, but they say, I've never been to an interview for 10 years. I've always just been going through the ranks. Sometimes there's a need to relocate. Now, we know many missionary friends who've had to relocate to their homeland at very short notice and then find work. But are they prepared? Were they thinking about that? Is there an eventuality that perhaps we should be thinking about? Life is not secure, even missionary work. And we also find a lot of people who are wanting to transition from one career into another. And that's also a very key area to understand that transition is a very positive thing to prepare for. So briefly, let me just give you an insight into one of our coaching programs that we do for as many people who want to attend. What is career readiness? Well, I think there are several ingredients. The one is pretty obvious, is to have a CV and resume that's up to date. I was particularly taken with Jag's comment last time we met about networking. And he was saying that even though he's in secure employment, every 3 months, every 6 months, he contacts friends in his network to actually keep in contact with them, know what they're doing, show interest in them. So in the event that he needs to use the contacts that he knows, they're not strangers. So do you have a list of contacts that are not strangers? Many people find interviewing terrifying. And it's surprising, even senior people, as I just mentioned, who've come up through the ranks, will come to me for coaching because they are just so unaware of this process of how it works. And interviewing is not a good way of sometimes of selecting persons, but that's the way we use in industry. And many people who have just come through the ranks, been tapped on the shoulder, got the next promotion, haven't been for a outside interview for 10, 20 years. But equally, there are half people that I meet that just don't like that interviewing, even being put on the spot, because it's something which they just are not used to. But I'm saying in your career readiness, just be prepared and be ready for that interview. A financial plan is an obvious one, but many people don't have a financial plan. The what if? If I lost my job, if I had to transition, if I had to whatever, I don't know what I would do. Typically, some people say to me, I don't know where the money goes. Well, I'm just saying to you, in life in general, that's a bad thing to have, that statement. You should know where the money comes from and you should know where it goes. In the event that something does happen, that you should know, I have a plan, I believe, to make it happen. I also believe that we should plan in our career readiness to have a healthy lifestyle. It's a pretty obvious one, that we should eat well, we should exercise, we should feel good about ourselves. Why? Well, that's good anyway. But when you go in front of a prospective employer, if you feel good about yourself, the likelihood is he or she will as well. And I think the important thing is in career readiness, when somebody has lost their job, one of the first things I say to people is, look, finding a job is a full-time job. Just get up in the morning and make it your work. Because if you get into the pattern of not getting up, making it your job, keeping fit and all the things, you will eventually find it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to make that transition back into full-time work. So the tips that I'm issuing here are make finding a job, making the transition a full-time job. Let me just home in on a few specifics here. Some of my pet subjects. Some of you have worked with me, so you know that I've got some pet subjects. A CV, a resume, is not a life story. It's actually a marketing flyer about your skills, experience, and achievements. I'm going to emphasize this because it's something which is very, very important. I've received CVs this week from clients, potential clients. Some, one was 14 pages and one was 20 pages. Now, those are extreme cases, but they have been told by professionals, these are good CVs. I have a good CV, but can you help me? And I find it very, at my age and with my experience, I can be very blunt because, well, that's what they're asking me to be. What do you think? I said, well, give up and write a book. And the second piece of advice actually is nobody's reading it. And that's a hard one to tell people that are really proud of their CV. They've worked on it. They've asked their mother, their father, their brother, their sister, all their friends what they think. And naturally, they're going to say, wow, that's wonderful. But they're asking the wrong people. And that is the number one reason why people are not called for interviews. The number one reason. Nothing to do with their experience, nothing to do with their skills. Their marketing flyer is not working. Jad, I hope you'll come in on the discussion later on, but his comment last time we spoke was extremely helpful. I think I'm getting the figures right, but out of 300 applicants to his company, he only sees the last 5. The first one is filtered out by a clerk, not deriding a clerk, but he just filters that out. The second one is filtered out by a manager, and he gets 5 out of 300. Now, in that 300, are there really no good candidates? Of course there are. Of course there are. But they're being filtered out for the wrong reason. In Dubai, where we worked for many years, we were told that the first 2 sifts were done by computer program anyway. So I'm laboring the point because I passionately believe in it. We have an example this week where people have had no interviews for 3 months, none, after a very focused approach. And yet they changed their CV in the way that we believe passionately that it should be done. And the very first time it went out, they got an interview. And they were called for an interview where there were 301 people applying for that job. So I'm just saying that point is so important. Get it right in terms of a marketing flyer. It's not a life story. Statistics show us that the CV is generally read between 10 and 20 seconds. It also shows us that the second page, 70% of people don't turn it to the second page. So when I was telling my friend who had 20 pages, I said, look, you've got 19 are not being read. By the way, the front page is not worth reading either because it's just got some background information about your address and telephone number. That's not going to get you a job. Anyway, I must move on because I could get very emotive about that one, but I'm going to carry on. Very, very important to see that. But also, I think the thing is, you've got to be very careful that we don't focus on the life story. We must focus on the marketing flyer. The other thing which surprises me that many people don't know what they're worth, have no idea. I say, well, what sort of salary are you looking for? Oh, I don't know. What are you worth in the marketplace? I've got no idea. And I'm just saying that's not being ready. If I were going to sell my car today, I don't want somebody to come to the door and say, I'd like to buy your car. How much do you want? I have no idea. So I'm not going to major on that. We must know our worth. We must know our worth in our climate that we're in, which is unusual, the country we're working in, which is Australia, or if we're going abroad, we must know our worth. Never feel that you have to give an exact figure. But the correct answer, if you're asked about that, is I feel that with some of my skills, experience, is worth somewhere between X and Y. So you're giving them a range. Never say it must be X or must be Y or whatever, because we're in a discussion like selling a car. But if you don't know your worth, don't go to the marketplace. It's as basic as that. We also must be very careful as well that we're keeping abreast with our own industry. We may have forgotten to read the journals, don't look at the news because we're in a very secure job. Well, that's a big mistake. There are examples, even this week, where the interview was homing in on current things happening in this person's industry. Unfortunately, they had a lot of knowledge. They've been spending time on getting things right. Also, just remember to have a financial plan. You know, we never want to have this thing happen to us. But if I'm quoting people that say, well, I don't want to have one. I said, well, that's really foolish. Just think about fitness as well. If it's, I don't mean being super fit, but feeling good about yourself is a very key point in being ready for that transition. Okay, let me just touch on a few points as why people don't get career ready. I think the first one is fear. That is the number one. I've had people say, oh, I don't want to have a plan because it might happen. Well, I say, okay, well, don't put up your fire alarm because you might have a fire. Don't write a will because you might be dead tomorrow. I mean, that's as crazy as that. I don't want to have a financial plan because it will probably make it happen. I think it's not a priority. That's the second reason. We'll do it sometime. Somehow we'll cope. Well, I'm going to encourage you this morning, particularly with the events of the last few months, that it should be a priority, not a panic situation, but a priority. The other thing is uncertainty. People don't know what to do. Well, that's where we come in because we're career coaches. We've been working with people for over 20 years on dealing with these issues. So let me just finally draw this little section to a close here. When I went to a doctor some years ago, he gave me a health check. And he had all the list of things that he thought I should be checked about, all prodding and poking and all those things. So he came back to me about blood pressure and cholesterol and all the things that we know about. And he said, okay, this is what we should find in you at your age. And this is what we have found. Okay, well, there are some good things and some not so good things. So my challenge to you this morning is if you think about those points that I've raised, which of the boxes are you going to tick? Or which of them need attention? And if they do need attention, what are you going to do about it? See, after the health check that I had, I could have seen the report, torn it up and said, I'll pay the $100 and that's it. But I decided to do something about it. And I hope that I've convinced you in these few moments to think about these points and be challenged by them and do something about it. Now, you may take weeks, it may take months, it doesn't matter, but do something about it. Because that's the message of career readiness. Facing any career challenge with confidence. We must realize that no job is secure. Who would have thought that we'd be in this situation 6 months ago? Even the most secure company or whatever has taken a tumble. And therefore, it's important for us to be career ready just as much as the ambulance standing by at the station knows where to go because the call comes through. They're ready. They know what they're going to do. All right, finally, let me tell you some good news. My friend's house at the waterfront did not burn down. Point number 2, I recovered completely from the surgery. But I've made a decision not to take Jeannie if I ever go to hospital again. She's not coming with me. Third point, Jeannie does know the passwords. So we're okay there. It's actually quite interesting because actually she had the passwords and I had to find them from her, but that was just a good, quick joke that she had. Now we have been ready. I prepared myself out of Joe's conversation to be ready. And now we've been very privileged, both of us, to work in about 23 countries. Coaching ministry teams, and those are many Christian opportunities, but invariably in the country you say, so what is a Christian? What do you do? And I can still answer that question in 2 minutes. There's a church that I know well that part of their membership process is you have to explain the gospel in 2 minutes to one of the elders to be really sure that you understand the basics of what is a Christian. It's about God, it's about the Bible, it's about God, it's man, it's sin, it's repentance. You know, it's not just, I don't know, it's a very clear, and I'm just putting to you, if you're a Christian or you have a faith and you want to share it, bear in mind that you may only have 2 minutes. And also you may be the only person to have shared the Christian faith with that individual. It's a responsibility. Because if we have a faith, I believe it's important for us to share it. I'm ready now to help people. Having done career readiness for many years, I'm ready to help people in their transition. That's a gift that both Ginny and I have. And my question to you is, are you ready? Thank you.